In 1991, it occurred in Sha Tin, Hong Kong. After graduating from secondary school, I didn't have a job and was just wandering around all day, so my father sent me to a distant relative's house to learn how to paint professionally. It was actually about making paper people, paper horses and paper structures. In a nutshell, it was a collection of paper objects used for burning. Because this was a profession associated with the dead, many people found it unappealing at first. I was no exception, but after more than a year of study, my perspective had shifted dramatically. First and foremost, this was a primary source of income for my family, with some colored paper and dried rice stalks that could be sold for money, and it was a highly skilled industry. And my master, I'm not sure what to say about him, but he was very well known within 10 miles and 8 villages nearby. He was a great teacher to me and taught me many things. My master and I moved a few large paper animals out of the house one morning in September to make room. My master was also very familiar with the funeral process, and he was frequently invited to perform funeral rites. But before he left, he told me that the finished paper people should never have their faces painted because the paper people would become spiritual. Drawing souls was the term used in the paper drawing industry to describe craftsmen who used color to draw the facial features of a person on the paper ones. I believed it was because he was afraid I would make an ugly face and waste my time, so I didn't care too much, and I was afraid the master would nag me, so I continued to work at home. The majority of people were afraid to enter the paper shop. Actually, after I got used to it, I preferred to be alone and work faster. I shaped the hot oil-soaked cornstarch into a man's skeleton, and it was quickly assembled. A palm tree leaf stalk soaked in hot oil was not only strong, but also difficult to break, making it very convenient and flexible. The wire connecting the paper body had to be made of caster fiber. These things hadn't been too sloppy under the master's supervision. The master frequently stated that in this profession, you shouldn't deceive people because there were ghosts. It was easy to deceive people, but it was not easy to deceive ghosts. These materials were typically prepared by the master himself, and all I could do was follow. In our industry, the paper used to be put on the frame was referred to as leather, which referred to the type of skin that was glued to the paper body. All good leather was made of dried straw. No glue was used in the manufacturing of plaster, which was made from flour and glutinous rice puree. The ratio of water to flour, as well as the temperature, were critical for ensuring flexibility. Although many people were no longer interested in this ancient craft, my master was always interested in it. Even though I could disagree with him, I still greatly respected him. After more than a year of study, I had mastered all of these things. It took me half a morning, and while I couldn't see the sophistication of the skeleton inside, the outer appearance was nearly identical to what the master would have done. I took out a pencil case from the drawer to color the paper man, and I wanted to draw him wearing clothes. I was facing the paper man at the time, but I suddenly felt eyes staring at me behind the desk. I looked back, and only the paper man was there. I discovered that the master's brush set was specially designed for drawing people and creating their souls on paper. At that precise moment, an idea occurred to me. The color of the sky outside was gradually darkening by this point. Master had yet to return. Perhaps he forgot about time because he had been invited to drink. But after a long struggle, I gave up the thoughts in my heart, not wanting to irritate my master. It was already 10 o'clock at night, and the master hadn't returned, and when I looked at the paper people in the room, I got a strange feeling in my heart. I had some issues like that. I couldn't forget an idea that had formed in my mind. I always wanted to do it. My master would never let me do this, so this was a good chance for me to show it off. so I began to draw souls for the paper people cautiously. Actually, I enjoyed writing and drawing, so I believed I could draw very well. It was just if the drawing was bad, the master would consider it a waste of time, so I was very careful. I finished my first paper man nervously, and it was a huge success. I became more daring and quickly drew the second paper person. The only thing I didn't understand was why there was so much red in the master's color box. When I finished, I looked at my masterpiece and saw that it was as good as the paperman made by the master. Speaking of the soulful paperman, I believed it was even more beautiful than his paperman. Everything had been cleaned up, but the master hadn't returned. He surely had been too drunk, so I went to bed first. At first, I couldn't sleep well because I was always worried about when the master would return to open the door for him. But my eyelids didn't listen to my body, and I fell asleep without realizing it when I lay down. Perhaps I had a good night's sleep as well, because I heard people walking around. The sound was very strange. It appeared that someone had walked around in front of the door, and the sound of paper rubbing could be heard from time to time. I sat up, and there was a noise on the bed, followed by a sound in front of the door. I thought, that's strange. Was that my fantasy? I checked the pendulum clock on the table. It was past 12 o'clock at night. I was afraid it was the teacher returning drunk and unsteadily, causing damage from outside. So I got up and went outside to see. But what struck me as odd was that there was no one outside, and I couldn't figure out where the voice was coming from. I opened the door once more and looked out into the courtyard to see if there was anything there. However, the yard was also empty. Master may have drank too much and slept in an acquaintance's house. He was unlikely to return tonight. It appeared that the sound I just heard was a dream, because I was dreaming at the time. However, the light in the room enabled me to see a black shadow rushing towards me, and behind me appeared a man holding a wooden stick. Before I could get a better look, a wooden stick smacked me across the head. I couldn't figure out what was going on because of the surprise attack. It was only then that I reluctantly pushed myself up, looking back to see who had hit me. But when I saw it clearly, it made my head spin. How could it do this? In front of me stood the paper man I just made today, a man made of paper with skeletons made of palm leaf stalks and straw paper. How was the paper man in front of me able to move? And he even wanted to kill me with that stick he was holding. I couldn't care less about it right now, so I backed away as quickly as I could, avoiding the club that kept swinging downwards. But at that precise moment my hand came into contact with something, a sickle used to cut rice. I desperately waved the sickle forward, cutting a long hole in the paperman's thigh. The paperman's movements came to a halt, but I was terrified on the inside, as if my masterpiece was being destroyed by myself. Those skeletons made of palm leaf stalks and parchment skins were entirely my own creation. I was in a state of shock at the time. I'm not sure where I got such ridiculous ideas. The man in front of me was about to suffocate me. While I was still dazed, the paperman suddenly rushed forwards towards me, perhaps because I drew too much. The paperman at the time appeared to be a real person, which was very strange. I immediately threw those ridiculous ideas out the window and continued to wave my sickle forward. Because the crescent was so sharp, I could see it had cut a few holes in the paperman's body. Despite the fact that all of the skin had been ripped and brushed, skeletons inside had been cut open. The paperman's movements continued. The paperman lunged in front of me in the blink of an eye, a large stick in his hand raised towards me. I was helpless to resist. All I could do was close my eyes and wait for the stick to fall. But at that moment I felt a light in front of me and heat spreading. When I opened my eyes, there was a burning paperman in front of me with a torch through its chest. There was a figure standing behind the blazing light and raging flames, holding a torch. When the master returned, he saw my situation and used torches to relieve my siege. When I saw my master return, I just wanted to tell him what had happened, but he abruptly stopped me when I said, "Teacher, just now it became completely real."
Bring out all the paper people.
To avoid a disaster, the master directed that I immediately burn all of the paper people that I had made today. The fruits of my day's labor turned into a raging fire in the blink of an eye, but after witnessing the heinous appearance of the recently resurrected Paperman, I felt compelled to burn it all down. The master asked why paper people had become real and why I had given them a soul. It turned out the story has a long history and many ancient secrets. This drawing soul is even a never-ending anecdote. If you draw the Paperman too much like a human, he will have a soul. The Paperman only needed bones, and their responsibility was to replace the souls of the dead, so the Paperman couldn't have a soul. In the master's chalk box, there was a red color made of rooster blood powder mixed with cinnabar that could only be lit at the last moment when the Paperman and Paper Horse were about to be burned. That was how it ended. I'm still learning craft techniques from the master. I'm still doing this job, but I have a lot of respect for the people who came before me. I've seen a lot of strange things these days in this business, which was known as doing business with the living during the day and doing business with the dead at night.